Welcome back to the Let's Go podcast. We're here in the podcast studio, and we're missing Juan.
Yeah, he's gone.
We're missing Juan.
I've been texting him all day. He never responds.
Yeah, so Juan was visiting his son. We're proud of all the things that Caleb was up to, and so doing some of that over there in the Dallas area, which is good. But we are here just nevertheless to talk about the text from the last week. We're just one more week left in the Sermon on the Mount, and Blake's going to preach this Sunday. We're in Matthew 7, and I thought yesterday's message was really an encouraging message to the church, but also an honest word to the church, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think first, if anybody finds Juan, tell him we're looking for him.
Yeah.
And we really want him to come home.
He wouldn't let me put him on my Find My on the phone. I don't know what that's all about. He doesn't want me to track him, or
I had a staff member that was like, I want to be accountable to you. I want you to have my Find My. And I did, and it just didn't. It ended up leading to the thing that would cause him to not have a job anymore.
Oh, no.
And so it's like, hey, you wanted to be accountable.
You asked for it, bud.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Matthew chapter 7. So we're coming to the close of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus gets to this picture where he talks about the wide and narrow gate, right? And enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is broad that leads to destruction. There will be many there, but the gate is small, and the way is narrow that leads to life. For me, I've thought for a long time that the interesting thing about the gates is that both gates are promising you the same thing. They're promising you life everlasting. And, I have worked for a few years trying to wrap my mind around the gospel message that says, number one, salvation is just about life after death, right? The kind of the safety net, fire insurance. I don't want to go to hell, and so I need this. Like, I'm going to pray the Lord's Prayer, and I'm going to be baptized just so that, and I'm going to go do whatever I want. And that just doesn't seem like what Jesus. Like, I think that if one of Jesus's original disciples were to be like, yeah, this is like afterwards, were to be like, all right, I'm good to go now that like I was baptized or whatever. It seems like, oh, there's no world in which that makes sense.
Well, in the sort of, you can think of texts that kind of has brought theology out of. I mean, the thief on the cross is one that kind of comes to mind. It's like this guy that's just, done whatever he's done, and then he meets Jesus on the cross, and Jesus is like, today you're going to be with me in paradise. And so all I have to do is on my deathbed, I've got to make a profession of faith, and I'm good. And that really isn't, it's not capturing the picture of what Jesus presents to us as following his way.
Well, and preachers have been working around that by saying, and you might die tonight, like, because that's what it is, right? It really is, as long as you're doing your deathbed. But it's like, well, if you died tonight, you might die tonight. You could have a car crash, and all that stuff is so true. And I would add a caveat, and this is what I tell folks a lot of times with a lot of stuff, is that I believe the Lord is more gracious than we could ever be, but I also believe that salvation is a mystery of the Lord. Mm-hmm. And so we can only operate on what we know on this side. And so if somebody had come to me after the sermon and said, I really am, worried that I'm not saved and all that stuff, I would have assured them that, like, man, the grace of Jesus is great. That's not the point of the message. The point of the message is that you have a responsibility to ask questions about what way you're on. Way meaning road, meaning direction, meaning what destination are you heading to? And there's a path that leads to life eternal. There's a path that leads to, at the end, saying, Lord, Lord, and Jesus saying, I knew you, versus saying, I never knew you. Mm-hmm. I also think, Wade, an interesting facet of this is, this whole sermon, Jesus has been speaking in opposition to the hypocrites, to the Pharisees. And the reason that I didn't add so many caveats in the sermon yesterday, the sermon that I preached yesterday, is because, not because I'm preaching to a bunch of Pharisees, but I'm preaching to generally religious people. The average person that was in our pew yesterday, and there were guests and there were unbelievers, I know both that's true, but the average person is a really wonderful religious person. And Jesus is saying to those, hey, you might be religious and be on the wrong road. because your religion is leading you to where I'm just following the law, right? He has already said, you've heard that it was said, but I say to you. And I think that the message for religious people is, hey, pay attention to where you're going, because you might look up and realize it's not actually where you think you're going.
Yeah, I mean, and it is true that the entrance to Walt Disneyland or Disney World, it looks like it's a great thing.
It's great.
But you know what's beyond those gates, right? Is lines and debt.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's right.
But we
right.
have, I do think that the gate thing is something that I can't remember where this came from in my past, but I want to say that there are some that have thought, and you probably read some commentaries, there are some that have said that maybe Jesus was actually speaking about a specific gate. Did you read anything in that realm, or it's in my mind for some reason that perhaps he was actually referencing a gate outside of the city that would have had a lot more context to the people that were listening, the narrow gate versus the wide gate, or is that just me making something up in my head?
Yeah, no.
I feel like I've read something.
No, there's
about
definitely
that.
conversation about that. One of the things that, like in John 5, the pool, Bethesda, there's a narrow gate by that, and it would be the gate that like cattle and folks would go through.
Right.
And so he's the shepherd walking through the sheep gate is what it is. Going to the
Right.
People at the pool. Bethesda,
Yeah,
which is
I
up
didn't
there.
know. I was just you were talking about it yesterday, and it was just racking my mind going, I feel like I've heard something, and it made me want to go
Yeah.
read more.
Well, and one of the
Haven't
one
had
of the
time.
one of the popular is the camel
Eye through
like,
the needle, right? Yeah.
eye through the needle, where people are like, oh, well, that was a gate, and it's like, well, most folks we don't know archaeologically that there was a gate. It could just be like it actually is it's impossible to be.
Yeah,
rich
you
and-
can't do
yeah,
this.
so.
This is not something that works. I do think that the strength of sort of what this text should resonate in us. It obviously starts with the narrow and the wide gates, but it does kind of end with this warning against false prophets and this line that Jesus says. Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers.
Yeah.
This idea, I think you mentioned it yesterday, but it's possible to do work for God without God.
Yeah.
It's possible to be busy about the things of God's kingdom without being busy with God working to bring his kingdom to earth today. And oftentimes, and we alluded to this a little bit, but it can just feel like the work of religion can just be compartmentalized into such a way. And that's what he's been saying to the Pharisees that were there this whole time. It's like, you've heard it was said, but I say unto you, there's a better way. And I thought that it was particularly strong. What brought you to the fruit analogy that you used? You said, you'll be able to tell by the fruit that you bear.
Right.
And you referenced the fruits of the Spirit from Galatians. And
John 15, the vine.
I really think that is the connection to, to someone that says, well, I've gone to church my whole life and I've tried to be good. And so are you telling me that, well, yeah, but I think that we all, even I was thinking like, well, what is the fruit of my life?
Yeah, there's
Right? That's such a profound
the
question.
self-examination.
For us to ask.
Well, it's interesting because you start with the narrow and wide gate, and obviously we've talked about this a lot, that the best way to do the Sermon on the Mount would be to preach the whole Sermon on the Mount altogether. And we start back in the Beatitudes, and then the argument that I made this past week really started last week with the judge not, right? Like planking your own eye before the speck in somebody else's eye. It starts with self-awareness, and so you need to be aware of your own sin and your own shortcoming, and you need to be aware of your own fruitfulness. Like, are you being fruitful? Which means if you are being fruitful, you should celebrate and rejoice that the Lord has given you fruit of the Spirit. But if you're not, you need to ask the question, wait, have I connected to something else, right? Am I more connected to my social media or political party or the food that I like to eat or the restaurant, or am I more connected to even my spouse and my family? Is my fruit is producing, getting my kids all the sports games, and that's what or do you have the fruit of the Spirit that you're able to examine in your life? And so do you notice over time, I'm becoming more patient, I'm becoming gentler and kinder, my self-control is getting better.
Are the things of the kingdom, are the things of Jesus becoming more the things of me?
Yeah.
And there's this idea that I think if we were to talk about this even more and maybe even charge the church just as a whole, like, what is the fruit of FBC Athens?
Right.
What is the fruit of your church? Name your church.
You're right.
Because it's easy to kind of make these all about just us and my personal, fruit in my life. And you should do that, and we should reflect on that. But I also think that a church that's faithfully trying to be about the things of the kingdom is going to have fruit that reflects God's kingdom. It's going to be the hands and feet of Jesus, as you like to say,
Right.
in a world that really needs Jesus. And that's what I thought was particularly strong about your sermon yesterday was just this call to examine your fruit. Like, take a look at the base of the tree and see what has been produced.
Yeah. Well, also this belief that anybody can become a wolf in sheep's clothing. Like it can happen to all of us, and maybe in seasons of our life, it's been true that, like, man, I was a wolf in that season, and I needed somebody to point that out to me, which is different than judging somebody that is, especially needing the grace of Jesus, but to say to somebody, hey, I think that you're even not like don't go up to someone and say, hey, I think you're being a wolf, but to say, hey, I think you're being harsh. I think whatever the opposite of the fruit of the Spirit is, right? You're unkind. Like, you really are lacking self-control, but demanding that of somebody else.
Well, and the thing is, and you said it yesterday, is it's not as if, someone becomes a wolf in sheep's clothing overnight. It's not like you woke up and was like, okay, well, I'm going to take advantage of people. And sometimes, and this is what gets me kind of to the full circle of this message yesterday, is as we talked about the gate, and then we talk about the false prophets, and we talk about how we need to examine our fruit. There is this idea that, true or not, is that, well, I need to claim Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and then I get to go to heaven. And there is some truth to that, but there's also this overwhelming truth that we go through life, and there's so much stuff that hits us, and there's hard things that hit us, and as you're going through your life, you might be producing good fruit, and then some sort of heavy grief or trial comes along, or some wolf gets a hold of you, and you end up in this place that's really, really difficult. And Jesus says, he says that the gate is narrow, but he never says that the way will be easy.
Yeah.
Like, he says that his yoke will be easy.
Yeah.
But he doesn't say that the way will be easy.
Yeah.
And so that's what I had in my mind yesterday as you were talking about that. It's like, but wait, didn't Jesus say? Yes, he did. He said that the yoke would be easy. But what is a yoke? It's to carry these things of Jesus. He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, and I want to give you rest. But he doesn't promise. If anything, we look at the life of Jesus and see that through his death on the cross, the road is never easy.
Yeah. The yoke is easy.
The yoke is easy, but
there's work to do, though.
On the road,
there is.
right?
It's not that there is no yoke. Like, you are carrying a yoke, and Jesus is carrying the weight of that. Have you ever heard of a revivalist preacher named Marjo Gortner? This is one of my favorite.
I grew up in the strict Church of Christ world, so I didn't know many of these.
You didn't know
revivalist names.
He was one of the first celebrity preachers. I just looked this up to confirm this. He, talking about performing miracles without being with Jesus, he was ordained by his parents to preach at the age of 4 on these revival circuits that they used to do. He was born in the 40s, so he got popular in the late 40s as a 4, 5, 6-year-old preaching, because he was a great speaker as a 4, 5, and 6-year-old. And people, would give their life to Jesus. And so he grew up doing this. He never submitted his life to Jesus. He actually was never baptized himself. He filmed a documentary in his 20s that you can find, I think, on Amazon Prime, Marjo, which is fascinating. And he's doing all these, and he was one of the first celebrity. Marjo's coming to town. Marjo Gortner. That name, I don't know how that name ever sold, but it does. Marjo's coming to town. And so he'd go into these towns and he'd preach these revivals and do all the, slaying spirits and the miracles, healing people and snake handling and all sorts of stuff. And then he's recording a documentary, and then he'd go into the backstage and be like, I can't believe anybody believes any of that stuff.
Mm.
And people would leave swearing that their life was changing. And it was, because he was preaching, he was reading scripture, but he never believed any of it. And made a bunch of money doing it, and just thinking, and then his life came crumbling down, as you can imagine, towards the end. And just a fascinating, just came to mind. I should have shared a story yesterday, but just came to mind of like people can do crazy great things, and them themselves be in such a terrible place. And this is what I know you would say this to a young pastor. I'd say it to a young pastor, young believer, is that the fruit of your ministry is never worth selling your soul for. Right. And so if the Lord calls you to do this great ministry, and you can do it and have great integrity in your personal spiritual life, you should do that. But if anything you're doing, ministry, family, work, if anything you're doing leads you to compromise your personal relationship with Jesus, then that thing that you're doing is not your highest and best use or call, because your love for and integrity of relationship with Jesus is your highest and best call. And we could talk all day about the ways in which the pressures of ministry and the tension of ministry pulls us to forsake our own spiritual life, because I got to get up and I got to go. But that's not just a ministry thing. Like, people in the real world get it. I think that people just think that we probably sit around, praying, and we're trying to pray more.
We need to pray more. Yeah, we do, and we have, and that's the thing, is that if you get so fixed in the details of the day-to-day life in ministry, and you try to accomplish all of these things without God, and one of my favorite sayings of Henry Nouwen is, distractions are the ministry. Like, we must remember in the midst of our daily life to enter into, as what was that old study, experiencing God, like to look around and see where God is at work and wade into those waters. But also this understanding that we're not just manufacturing church for you to have a good Sunday.
Yeah.
Like, we want you to actively be a participant in the kingdom work of God in your daily life. And we want to be about that too as pastors. And how do we do that? Well, we enter into prayer and we ask God. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to this really difficult temptation of what? We want control over the day-to-day of our life.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to relinquish that control and say, God, whatever you need to show me today, God, let me have eyes to see and ears to hear. And it can be a bold prayer. I was reading this morning in Exodus. Moses goes up on the mountain on Sinai, and we know this story of him coming down, and his face is radiant because he's been with God. But in that story, it was really interesting to me, and I don't know how I've never made this connection, but first God says to him as a promise, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. And then just a few moments later, Moses asks a really bold question. He says, not even a question, he says, show me your glory. And we sing a song, Open Up the Heavens, where that bridge is just, show us your glory, Lord.
Yeah.
And we need to relinquish our ability to control the world and the things that are around us in order to let God work in our lives and work through our lives. And you can certainly see how that's a narrower gate.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't give you as much control. But you have to relinquish that control if you want to live in the freedom where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Sorry, and now I'm preaching, but
no, it's good.
that's this I love your playground analogy, right? We like to look at our lives as like, well, I have to walk on this tightrope. It's like, no, like, if you can relinquish control and give it to God, like, the playground is wide and vast, and there's so much good to have.
It's awesome playground. I think that one of the reasons that I'm excited about Blake's sermon, we were working on it even a little bit in between services this week. It's the conclusion. And I don't want to preach his. Sure. I'm not going to preach his sermon for him, but like for our podcast listeners, you get this exclusive that, it's the
wise
strong
man built
foundation, and then the sandy foundation, the rock and the sand. And one of the things though that it says that I point out in the very first sermon of the series is, you who hear these words and put them into practice.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's so fascinating about practice is, number one, like, so we have to practice these things. You know, like we have to grow in them. But the church has done such a bad, and this is one thing that Blake said that I'm really excited to hear him unpack. But the church has done such a bad job of letting people fail. And I'm not talking about like, oh, this great moral thing, but I'm just mean like there's so much pressure to, I'm not going to do something unless I'm good at it the first time, right? Like, and there are statistically less teenagers that are driving because they're like, I'm not a good driver. It's like, yeah, nobody was at first. Like, we all learned to drive. But one of the things about practice is practice means that you have to get better. Like, you're going to come up short and you're going to fail. And I just thought that was so insightful of him to notice that the church needs to be a training ground for letting people try things and come up short and say, I have this great idea and it might not work, and that's okay. And and so I just am.
Well, that's good. It's been a good series, and we'll get to do one more podcast on this series, and then we're getting ready for, Easter and all of that coming up. And so we're going to have a short series just on our mission for 3 weeks, which is going to be really good. I'm excited to kind of hear you unpack that, as you've been here for coming up not too far away from a year now.
Not too far. We'll get there.
And,
I hope we'll get there. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But I've really enjoyed us spending so much time in these precious words from Jesus from Matthew 5-7, and we'll conclude this on Sunday.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Sunday. Any last words?
No,
I
man.
think we pretty much covered everything. We didn't really talk about like the floor or things you left behind, but I think we kind of got into some of that.
I think that's right, and it's just like, examine your fruit.
Yeah,
that's what we do. So
make sure it tastes good. Actually, on one last note. Sorry, I know. On that note, I got some avocados from Costco a week ago, and they were not ripe. You know what I mean? Like, they were bright green and hard.
Okay.
And I accidentally left them in my truck for a week, and they were perfect.
Really?
Yeah. Got them out yesterday.
Isn't an avocado a vegetable?
Yeah. Well, no, it's actually a fruit. It has a seed.
You know, tomatoes are fruit too?
Yeah. It has seeds. That's what I always heard, is if it has seeds, it's a fruit.
Thank you guys for joining us
thanks
today.
for joining us. And I will also say that one time I had a friend that really wanted to go to Golden Corral. Yeah. And I thought he was joking.
Yeah.
I thought, you can't be serious. You want to, like, we're in the DFW area. You want to go to Golden Corral? And he was like, dude, I love Golden Corral.
It's the promised land.
It's the promised land. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next one, and we'll just sign off with the mission. Love God.
Live like Jesus.
Serve others.
Let's go. Vamos.
Vamos.